We are given this function f of x equals negative 3 cos 7x defined in the interval x greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to pi by 7. So we have to answer these questions. That is, we have to find the inverse of f of x, the range of f of x, domain of f inverse of x, and range of f inverse of x. So first, let's find the inverse of the function f of x. So we can find this inverse as like this. So first let me copy the function f of x. This equals negative 3 cos 7x. So while finding the inverse of any function in the first step, we replace this f of x by y. So when replace this as y, this becomes y equal negative 3 cos 7x. And in next step, we interchange x and y. That is, x we have to replace as y and y we have to replace as x. So therefore, this y will become x, and this equals negative 3 times of cos of this x will be replaced as y. So it becomes 7y. And in the next step, we have to solve for y. So let's solve for y from this equation. So this is the equation that we have, x equals negative 3 cos of 7y. To solve for y, first we have to divide both sides by negative 3. So therefore this becomes x over negative 3, and this equals cos of 7y. And this in fact can be written as x over negative 3 is negative of x over 3. Now we can take cos inverse on both sides. So when we do that, we get cos inverse of negative of x over 3. This equals 7y. So we divide by 7 by both sides so that we will get the value of y. So therefore this equals, so this implies we get the value of y equals cos inverse of negative of x over 3 divided by 7. And finally, in the last step, that is to determine the inverse, we replace y as f inverse. So therefore this becomes f inverse of x equals cos inverse of negative of x over 3 over 7. So this is the expression for inverse of the given function. We now determine the range of f of x. For this, I'm going to take the endpoints of the domain of the function, that is x is greater than or equal to 0, less than or equal to pi by 7 is the domain of the function. In this, we will substitute x equal to 0 as well as x equal to pi by 7 into the function and find the possible values of f of x. So when x equals 0, that is f of 0, this equals negative 3 times of cos of 7 times of 0. 7 times of 0 is 0, so cos 0. So therefore this becomes negative 3 times of cos 0 is 1. So this becomes negative 3. And when x equal to pi over 7, we get f of pi over 7. This equals negative 3 times of cos of 7 times of pi over 7. So these two get cancelled and we get negative 3 times of cos pi. The value of cos pi is negative 1. So this becomes negative 3 times of negative 1 is positive 1. In fact, we can see that at x equal to 0, the cos function is maximum, and at x equal to pi by 7, the cos function is minimum. That is, it varies from positive 1 to negative 1, which means at endpoints, the function is giving maximum and minimum values. So we can say that the maximum value attained by this function f of x is positive 3, and the minimum value that is attained by this function is negative 3. So therefore, the range of this function is negative 3 to positive 3. We now determine the domain and range of f inverse of x. So for this, we are going to use the properties of inverse of a function. So suppose if we have a function f of x and its inverse as indicated as f inverse of x, then according to the properties of function and inverse of its function, this domain of the function, that is domain of f of x, this equals range of f inverse of x. and also range of f of x. This equals domain of f inverse of x. So this is the property of the function and its inverse. We are going to replace this property to determine the domain of f inverse of x and the range of f inverse of x. So is let's say this property is 1 and this is property 2. Now to determine the domain of f inverse of x, we use the property 2. So in this we see that the domain of f inverse of x, this equals range of f of x. We already determined the range of f of x. So we can simply say that the domain of f inverse of x is equal to the range of f of x. So therefore this equals negative 3 to positive 3. So this is the domain of f inverse of x. Now let's determine the range of f inverse of x. For that we use the property 1. So we can clearly see that the range of f inverse of x is equal to the domain of f of x. Clearly, from the given function, we know that the domain of f of x is x greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to pi by 7. So you can write down this in interval notation as like this. So this is the domain of f of x. Therefore, the range of f inverse of x is equal to 0, comma pi over 7. And this has to be given in interval notation. So we answered the questions.